Peanut butter and chocolate. Peanut butter and jelly. Some things just go well together. One of the more peculiar of these perfect pairings, though sadly not peanut butter related, is that of dinosaurs and Native Americans. Nothing says cool quite like a lone American Indian sneaking through the underbrush, aiming his bow at a velociraptor. Only one character introduced the world to such a concept. Brutal survivalism, pulpy prehistoric adventure, and some good old-fashioned dino hunting. I'm talking, of course, about Turok. For myself and other children of the 90s, Turok is most known from his self-titled games on the N64, but many don't realize that Turok was first introduced in comics. Turok originally appeared in 4-color comics number 596 in 1954. Eventually getting his own title, Turok Son of Stone, in 1956, published by Dell and Gold Key Comics. Son of Stone told the story of two American Indians who together explored an area where time seemingly had stopped, and therefore was still populated by dinosaurs, called the Lost Valley. Not unlike Robert E. Howard's Conan the Barbarian, or famous pulp character Doc Savage, the original Son of Stone Turok comics were true old-school fun, pulp adventure books with self-contained tales of Turok and Endar's exploits in the valley, encountering various ancient reptilian beasts. Turok's shorthand name for many of these prehistoric predators was honkers. I guess due to the sounds they made. T-Rexes were called runners, pterodactyls flyers, raptors screamers, and so on. Though the original Turok Son of Stone was illustrated by Rex Maxon, hey Rex, fitting name. Different writers worked on Son of Stone, and it's debated who the actual creator of Turok was, but one writer, Gaylord Dubois, you gotta love these guys' names, was inspired by a visit to Carlsbad Caverns in New Mexico to create the Lost Valley. Decidedly old-fashioned, but still highly entertaining to this day, Son of Stone is a charming comic with a big heart and lots of love put into it. Jump ahead to 1992, the era of Capri Sun, smiley face t-shirts, and violent comic books. How could such an innocent, fun-loving, family-friendly property like Turok Son of Stone be brought up to date for the edgiest generation? This is where Valiant Comics comes in, with their gritty reboot of Turok, helmed by writer Tim Truman. Truman is responsible for both art and writing for various great comics, from developing the art style and aesthetic of John Ostrander's hard-boiled fantasy noir swashbuckler Grimjack, to his own DC Comics epic Hawkworld, and his work with Joe R. Lansdale on some of Jonah Hex's finest tales. Truman has an impressive resume. Heavily researching Native American culture, Truman wanted any depiction of the spiritual traditions and customs of Turok, who in this iteration was actually from a real-life tribe, to be as authentic as possible, despite the other science fiction elements present. Truman's Turok for Valiant introduced a revamped Turok, who was debuted in an issue of fellow Valiant Comics hero Magnus Robot Fighter. Concept and setting were changed slightly from Son of Stone. Turok and Andar were this time 18th century Indians. The Lost Valley was now the Lost Lands, and while still populated with dinosaurs, demons and aliens were also present. Time in the Lost Lands moves in a loop, and a bizarre antagonist, the Mother God, used the Lost Land as her headquarters, outfitting different dinosaurs with cybernetic implants and weaponry. The main bad guy of this Turok eventually ended up to be a villain called the Campaigner, and there were plenty of other antagonists as well. If you're one of the people turned off by modern comics and their penchant for shoehorning in politics, there are a few issues of the 90s Turok that might make you raise an eyebrow. Nothing too obnoxious, just a bit of Tim Truman, who is very left-leaning, working in some serious white guilt. 90s Turok is goofy as hell, and only gets more so as the series goes on, culminating in a truly wacko and gonzo issue in which both Hitler and Elvis are resurrected. You can't make this stuff up. Well, actually, you can. And Tim Truman did. His run on the character was a, pardon the pun, valiant effort. And while dated with its 90s aesthetics and attitude, and a little on the preachy side, 90s Turok is still a fun read. Let's jump ahead in time again, to the Acclaim Comics run of Turok, this time in 1998. This time, instead of having a character named Turok, Turok is simply a title, passed down, but as a nod to the original comic, its translation is Son of Stone. The Turok is responsible for protecting the barriers between dimensions. This time, a younger character named Joshua Fireseed takes up the mantle of Turok and is plunged into a world of science fiction and fantasy chaos. These later 90s Turok comics are, in my opinion, not very good. Once Acclaim got the rights to Turok, they also released the first Turok video game, which I mentioned at the beginning of this video is how most people know Turok. This first Turok game on the N64 was a super fast-paced first-person shooter with an emphasis on exploration and secrets. This game is up there with Serious Sam for me as one of the most unabashedly crazy and fun first-person shooters. But this first one was more based on the Valiant comics, though not outright. The character resembled the Valiant Comics version of Turok, and even the main antagonist was called the Campaigner, and Long Hunter was a boss, though there was very little story in the game. Turok 2, the sequel on N64, is more in line with what the Acclaim comics did story-wise. Joshua Fireseed is a younger character with way more attitude, and while Turok 2 is a phenomenal game, comics that ran alongside it telling its story are just a little too dated to be enjoyable at this point, even more so than the original 50s Turok. The story is paper thin, characters are obnoxious, and this was around the period where I feel Turok started to get away from the original premise. Sure, they're still dinosaurs, but they're far more humanoid looking and alien, more like reptile men than anything. This is around where I feel Turok started to sort of lose the plot. But, like I said, the game based on these comics, Turok 2, is awesome, though also has its dated flaws, such as having to replay insufferably complex maps over and over just to find that last secret you couldn't find. This may make you put down the game, it's so frustrating, but headache-inducing levels aside, Turok 2 did have one thing going for it, some truly creative weaponry, like the cerebral bore. Now, where have I seen that before? This isn't a video about the games, I just wanted to say that the first Turok is awesome, the second Turok is too, a little less so, and I haven't played Turok 3, but the series kind of slowly went downhill over time after this N64 trilogy, with a reboot later on PS3 that I never played. After the Acclaim comics, which were about Turok 2 and Turok 3 stories, Dark Horse Comics revived Turok in 2010. These I can't speak on because I haven't read them. It only lasted 4 issues. Dynamite Comics also later launched the series in 2013. Dynamite published a second Turok comic by Chuck Wendig. I probably will not be reading that one. But the point of this video is to introduce people to Turok as a concept, and in comic form. I highly suggest seeking out the old Son of Stone collections for a good, pulpy time. If you were a big 90s comics fan, like I was as a little kid, even if you have outgrown some of those 90s comics, the 90s Valiant Turok is still worth checking out as well, because there's a few pretty great issues in there. Past that, I can't personally recommend the Acclaim comics or anything else that came later, but hey, if you like those, there's even more for you to enjoy. I'll end by saying that I think the Turok character and concept has a lot of potential that has been untapped. Turok as a concept is like something out of an adolescent boy's dream. If you like dinosaurs as a kid or playing cowboys and Indians, combine the two and you will have some fun with the Turok comics. Turok hunting in the Lost Valley is one concept that should never be lost.